So it's 25 years from now.
Yeah.
Something costly has happened that people say that was the problem with AI.
Yeah.
What's your kind of best guess at what had happened over that period of time?
I mean, there's lots of kinds of things that could go wrong. I mean, I think when I think about kind of the accident stuff, right? There's the kind of the most extreme scenario is, the world gets destroyed, and I think that's there are scenarios where that could happen. For instance, if you had AI systems managing nuclear weapons or something like that, if a country turned over its national defense to AI or something like that, and the AI kind of wasn't well designed in the sense that it didn't even do what it was designed to do. Systems that are supposed to kind of manage the economy. If we really get to the point where we're really putting the whole world's trust in AI systems, then I do think there are extreme outcomes that could happen. On the less extreme side, just things like economic crashes, systems being unsafe, causing kind of individual casualties. On the kind of like social misuse and responsibility side, I think the potential invasiveness of AI technology could have a lot of concerns related to pervasive surveillance and things like that. Misuse of AI in general by nation states in changing the world balance of power.
That was Dario Amodei, warning us in 2018 about risks most people still haven't even heard of. But 1 year later, the man many call the godfather of AI, Geoffrey Hinton, issued a warning of his own, and it's even darker.
So there are many risks from powerful AI. There's going to be lethal autonomous weapons, which are going to be very nasty, and they're really going to be autonomous. The Americans very clearly have already decided. They say people will be in charge, but when you ask them what that means it doesn't mean people will be in the loop that makes the decision to kill. And as far as I know, the Americans intend to have half of their soldiers be robots by 2030.
We told you about this in why this AI Pentagon deal is terrifying, and now Hinton confirms it. The decision over human life could soon be made by a machine, not a soldier, but that's not the only danger he sees.
There's fake images, voices, and video, which are going to be used in the next election. There's many elections this year, and they're going to help to undermine democracy. I'm very worried about that. The big companies are doing something about it, but maybe not enough.
In this next clip, Hinton lays out the scenario that could wipe out millions of jobs and potentially end humanity as we know it, a machine.
There's a possibility of massive job losses. We don't really know about that. In the past, technology's often created jobs. But this stuff, well, we used to be the strongest things around apart from animals. And when we got the Industrial Revolution, we had machines that were much stronger. Manual labor jobs disappeared. So the equivalent of manual labor jobs are going to disappear in the intellectual realm when we get things that are much smarter than us. So I think there's going to be a lot of unemployment. One has to distinguish two kinds of unemployment too, two kinds of job loss. There'll be jobs where you can expand the amount of work that gets done indefinitely, like in healthcare. Everybody would love to have their own private doctor who's talking to them all the time, so they get a slight itch here, and the doctor says, no, that's not cancer. So there's room for huge expansion of how much gets done in medicine, so there won't be job loss there. But in other things, maybe there will be significant job loss. There's going to be massive surveillance. That's already happening in China. There's going to be cybercrime and deliberate pandemics. I'm very pleased that in England, although they haven't done much towards regulation, they have set aside some money so that they can experiment with open source models and see how easy it is to make them commit cybercrime. That's going to be very important. There's going to be discrimination and bias. But the threat I'm really worried about, and the thing I talked about after I left Google, is the long-term existential threat. That is the threat that these things could wipe out humanity. And people were saying this is just science fiction. Well, I don't think it is science fiction. There's lots of science fiction about it, but I don't think it's science fiction anymore. Other people were saying the big companies are saying things like that to distract from all the other bad things. And that was one of the reasons I had to leave Google before I could say this. I couldn't be accused of being a Google stooge. There's several ways in which they could wipe us out. So a superintelligence will be used by bad actors like Putin, Xi, or Trump, and they'll want to use it for manipulating electorates and waging wars, and they will make it do very bad things, and they may go too far, and it may take over. The thing that probably worries me most is that if you want an intelligent agent that can get stuff done, you need to give it the ability to create sub-goals. So if you want to go to the States, you have a sub-goal of getting to the airport, and you can focus on that sub-goal and not worry about everything else for a while. So superintelligences will be much more effective if they're allowed to create sub-goals. And once they are allowed to do that, they'll very quickly realize there's an almost universal sub-goal which helps with almost everything, which is get more control. So I talked to a vice president of the European Union about whether these things we want to get control so that they could do things better, the things we wanted so they could do it better. Her reaction was, well, why wouldn't they? We've made such a mess of it. So she took that for granted. So they're going to have the sub-goal of getting more power. So they're more effective at achieving things that are beneficial for us. And they'll find it easy to get more power because they'll be able to manipulate people. So Trump, for example, could invade the Capitol without ever going there himself. Just by talking, he could invade the Capitol. And these superintelligences, as long as they can talk to people, when they're much smarter than us, they'll be able to persuade us to do all sorts of things. And so I don't think there's any hope of a big switch that turns them off. Whoever is going to turn that switch off will be convinced by the superintelligence that's a very bad idea. Then another thing that worries many people is what happens if superintelligences...
We've been
compete with
sounding
each
this
other?
alarm in our AI Takeover series, while others chase headlines about the latest shiny AI features. We don't cover hype, we cover what's already happening. Still think this sounds like science fiction? Listen to this exchange from a 2023 congressional hearing. Then ask yourself if the people building AI have any limits.
A year ago, we couldn't have had this hearing because the technology that we're talking about had not burst into public consciousness. That gives us a sense, I think, of just how rapidly this technology that we're talking about today is changing and evolving and transforming our world right before our very eyes. I was talking with someone just last night, a researcher in the field of psychiatry, who was pointing out to me that the ChatGPT and generative AI, these large language models, it's really like the invention of the internet in scale, at least, and potentially far, far more significant than that. We could be looking at one of the most significant technological innovations in human history. And I think my question is, what kind of an innovation is it going to be? Is it going to be like the printing press that diffused knowledge and power and learning widely across the landscape, that empowered ordinary everyday individuals, that led to greater flourishing, that led above all to greater liberty? Or is it going to be more like the atom bomb? Huge technological breakthrough, but the consequences, severe, terrible, continue to haunt us to this
Senator
day.
Hawley asked the question no one in big tech wants to answer. The truth? AI will cause the greatest job loss in human history. And that's not speculation. It's confirmed in this next clip.
I alluded in my opening remarks to the jobs issue, the economic effects on employment. I think you have said, in fact, and I'm going to quote, development of superhuman machine intelligence is probably the greatest threat to the continued existence of humanity, end quote. You may have had in mind the effect on jobs, which is really my biggest nightmare in the long term. Let me ask you what your biggest nightmare is and whether you share that concern.
Like all technological revolutions, I expect there to be significant impact on jobs, but exactly what that impact looks like is very difficult to predict. If we went back to the other side of a previous technological revolution, talking about the jobs that exist on the other side, you know, you can go back and read books of this. It's what people said at the time. It's difficult tasks. Now, GPT-4 will, I think, entirely automate away some jobs. So, and there will be an impact on jobs. We try to be very clear about that, and I think it will require partnership between the industry and government, but mostly action by government to figure out how we want to mitigate that.
I think in the long run, so-called artificial general intelligence really will replace a large fraction of human jobs.
And job loss isn't the only threat. As Amodei and Hinton warned, AI can and will manipulate elections. This next clip shows exactly
so I'm looking
how.
at a paper here entitled Large Language Models Trained on Media Diets Can Predict Public Opinion. This is just posted about a month ago. The authors are Chu, Andreas, Ansalabere, and Roy. And their conclusion, this work was done at MIT and then also at Google. The conclusion is that large language models can indeed predict public opinion. And they go through and model why this is the case. And they conclude ultimately that an AI system can predict human survey responses by adapting a pre-trained language model to subpopulation-specific media diets. In other words, you can feed the model a particular set of media inputs, and it can, with remarkable accuracy, the paper goes into this, predict then what people's opinions will be. I want to think about this in the context of elections. If these large language models can, even now, based on the information we put into them, quite accurately predict public opinion, you know, ahead of time. I mean, predict, it's before you even ask the public these questions. What will happen when entities, whether it's corporate entities or whether it's governmental entities or whether it's campaigns or whether it's foreign actors, take this survey information, these predictions about public opinion, and then fine-tune strategies to elicit certain responses? So you can help me understand here what some of the significance of this is. Should we be concerned about models that can, large language models that can predict survey opinion and then can help organizations, entities fine-tune strategies to elicit behaviors from voters? Should we be worried about this for our elections?
Yeah. Thank you, Senator Hawley, for the question. It's one of my areas of greatest concern. The more general ability of these models to manipulate, to persuade, to provide sort of one-on-one, interactive information. I think this is a significant area of concern. And the interactivity, the ability to really model, predict humans well, as you talked about, I think is going to require a combination of companies doing the right thing, regulation, and public education.
I'd like to add two things. One is in the appendix to my remarks. I have two papers to make you even more concerned. One is in the Wall Street Journal just a couple days ago called "Help, My Political Beliefs Were Altered by a Chatbot." And I think the scenario you raised was that we might basically observe people and use surveys to figure out what they're saying. But as Sam just acknowledged, the risk is actually worse, that the systems will directly, maybe not even intentionally, manipulate people. And that was the thrust of the Wall Street Journal article. And it links to an article that I've also linked to called Interacting, and it's not yet published, not yet peer-reviewed, Interacting with Opinionated Language Models Changes Users' Views. And this comes back ultimately to data. One of the things that I'm most concerned about with GPT-4 is that we don't know what it's trained on. I guess Sam knows, but the rest of us do not. And what it is trained on has consequences for essentially the biases of the system. We could talk about that in technical terms. But how these systems might lead people about depends very heavily on what data is trained on them. And so we need transparency about that, and we probably need scientists in there doing analysis in order to understand what the political influences of, for example, of these systems might be. And it's not just about politics. It can be about health. It could be about anything. These systems absorb a lot of data, and then what they say reflects that data. And they're going to do it differently depending on what's in that data. So it makes a difference if they're trained on the Wall Street Journal as opposed to the New York Times or Reddit. I mean, actually, they're largely trained on all of this stuff, but we don't really understand the composition of that. And so we have this issue of potential manipulation, and it's even more complex than that because it's subtle manipulation. People may not be aware of what's going on. That was the point of both the Wall Street Journal article and the other article.
These warnings aren't about tomorrow. They're happening right now. which is why regulation matters. But here's what the current US President, Donald Trump, really thinks about
I have an
AI
expression,
safety.
America first, make America great again. A lot of great expressions, but they're all so true. To make America great again, we're going to make this industry absolutely the top, because right now it's a beautiful baby that's born. We have to grow that baby and let that baby thrive. We can't stop it. We can't stop it with politics. We can't stop it with foolish rules and even stupid rules.
Do we really want life-altering technology in the hands of a leader who calls safety rules foolish? What you're about to hear makes one thing clear. Human life isn't the top priority in this AI arms race.
But we do not shrink from the future or cower in the face of uncertainty. We dominate the future. We conquer new frontiers, and we control our own fate, and we determine by doing that our own destiny. Winning this competition will be a test of our capacities unlike anything since the dawn of the space age. I believe that. It's hard to believe as the president, the amount of enthusiasm for this one industry. I mean, I can talk about cars where we're doing incredibly well. We have car companies moving in all the time, but I talk about other industries. Everybody's saying this is going to dominate the world. It's going to dominate every industry that ever conceived. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if it's true, but I can tell you that a lot of very brilliant people think it is true. It'll dominate everything. It will challenge us to marshal all of our strength and flex the muscles of American ingenuity and resolve like probably never before. It will require us to blast through obsolete systems, cut through thickets of regulation. We've got to get rid of some of the regulation, but we want good regulation and rebuild the industrial bedrock of our country. And perhaps most importantly, winning the AI race will demand a new spirit of patriotism and national loyalty in Silicon Valley and long beyond Silicon Valley.
And if you think this is the end of the story, it's not even the beginning. The voices you've just heard, Amodei, Hinton, senators, and even the president, are not warning about a distant future. They're describing our reality right now. The race for AI dominance is not about innovation anymore. It's about control. Control over economies, over elections, over life and death itself. But here's the question no one in power seems willing to answer. When the machines make the decisions, who will they answer to? What's coming next will not just change the way you work or live, it will decide whether you even get to.